So,
All right, let's do it.
okay, so we're going to do very brief introductions. I'll tell you a few seconds about me, and then we'll jump into Pete, who's the more relevant person here. Meet the experts, meet the gurus. We're really not talking about me. We're talking about Pete Zerger. So I'm the facilitator. I'm a person who's been in the training business for 18 years. I've worked globally, pretty much in every country. I always use this as a reference point. I've been to Australia 7 times and India 20, and that tells you that I probably wasted too much time on an airplane. But I've gone to see clients because that's the way you learn about how to do things. What do people tell you? And so that's my background. Basically, I'm the person who coordinates a lot of programs. I work with instructors, I work with clients, I work with students, and then I help manage a team of people that deliver training around the world. With that, I'll pass it off to Pete. I'll tell you a bit about himself, and then we'll jump into more about the AZ-500 and related topics on Azure and security. So with that, Pete.
Great. Thank you, Paul. So I'm Pete Zerger. I'm a community figure, I guess you'd say. I've been a Microsoft MVP for a few years now. A lot of focus on the Azure platform, a fair bit of focus on cybersecurity in recent years. So I've done a bit of content for Starweaver and for some other platforms. You know, I know most of my friends from LinkedIn out here in the community, so you found me over there in other contexts. And I've had a lot of focus on Microsoft certification in recent months, and most notably with the AZ-500 exam, which is why we're here today, which, you know, amongst Microsoft exams is one of those that's not only very, very broad, but it's very deep as well. So looking forward to our discussion here, Paul.
Yeah, so Pete, just let's talk about Azure broadly so that we can get people oriented to the security elements. Let's talk about the clouds. Okay, maybe if you just discuss a little bit about what is the cloud. Obviously, I think most of us know, but let's sort of boil it down and then jump into the Microsoft cloud, the Azure cloud.
Right. So if we think about Azure as a platform, Azure is a public cloud, but you know, Azure plays heavily in hybrid scenarios, right, in the enterprise. So the most common identity model for Azure customers is a synchronized identity model where we're using Active Directory on-prem and Azure as our Azure AD as our cloud identity. And identity and cybersecurity, I think, are two areas where I see Microsoft having a pretty good lead over the rest of the stack. You know, if we look at the industry and we think about the other major cloud providers, we think about Google Cloud Platform, AWS, IBM. Cisco is playing in this space, through, not only native services, but acquisition. I chose Azure a lot of years ago because I'm come from the Microsoft world, and I felt like, this was where I wanted to sort of, anchor my expertise. And it's actually something I recommend to others as well. The reality is with a public cloud, it's not a common scenario that you're going to go all in a hybrid, in a multi-cloud scenario. So usually an organization is going to pick Azure or Amazon or Google Cloud Platform. Azure being, the player that's really gaining by leaps and bounds, chasing down Amazon's lead from years past.
Yeah, and it seems like obviously Amazon had that idea, let's say, from taking its retail business and saying, oh, well, we got a lot of servers here, we can do something with this, turning it into a cloud that's available for rent. And then obviously, Microsoft comes up fast because of its large installed base of users of global enterprises and all sorts of medium-sized companies.
Yeah, so for Microsoft, I think we've seen them close the gap on Amazon pretty quickly and surpass them in many areas, because if we look at the catalog of Microsoft service offerings in Azure, it's quite large, and Microsoft's commitment to the services in their cloud, tends to be very long term. We don't see services pop up and disappear as we do with Google Cloud Platform, for example. Mm-hmm. We've seen Microsoft's cloud services, all come together in such a way that, folks that were just Office 365 customers 5 years ago, it now seems an everyday occurrence that they're part of the Microsoft 365 suite. services. So with Microsoft, we don't see customers typically just picking one thing. They go all in with everything. What we call a best of breed approach, a best in platform approach, as opposed to best of breed.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I would imagine, like in lots of worlds, like in my world of training, Microsoft spends a lot of time with this customer discovery, understanding what are the problems are, and therefore delivering services and applications based on that, feedback.
That is a fact. Microsoft, any business who wants to make money is solving customer problems, right? And Microsoft is no exception there. And what we see with Microsoft in the past few years now is when they're solving a problem, they're solving that problem in a cloud-first way. And if there is a compelling reason to see that solution find its way back on-prem in some fashion, it will. Mm-hmm. But more and more we see that, it's definitely always a cloud-first approach. And and I think for folks out there that are trying to learn, if we just get right to the folks that would be watching something like this, taking a cloud-first approach to your learning is always the right strategy, because those are going to be the most marketable skills. And I would argue that with the growth we've seen on the Microsoft cloud platform, and with all of the discussions that come up around security and trust, Microsoft checks all of those boxes, right? It's going to be a good place to hang your hat for years to come.
For sure. I mean, we have government clients, and honestly, we've tried to use, I just give you an example of, GoToMeeting or other technologies just for meeting technology, and they'll say, sorry, it doesn't meet the on-ramp, the government on-ramp technology, so Microsoft has that box ticked. So let's talk about security broadly, because obviously there's lots of people who are in security who are listening to this, but there's also people who are nothing to do with security. And so I'm sitting here thinking, I'm a developer or I'm a business person. Obviously, we all know about hacking and all the concerns, and every bank that's online or every institution that has real critical data, which is personal information, PII, is concerned. So why, if I'm not a cybersecurity guru or expert, or that's my career path, why do I care about cybersecurity?
Well, so we know at the end of the day, if we want to just oversimplify this problem, the threat actors out there are trying to compromise your identities and your endpoints in order to gain access to your information. So they want to take control of an identity or an endpoint, but the real end game is they want to get to that information, be that customer data or something else. And we all obviously care for that reason alone that we need to protect our customer data. At the end of the day, that's a requirement. And you have to trust your cloud platform. And so you mentioned FedRAMP, I think it was just a minute ago. And when we think about security-related certifications, Azure as a platform has more, is certified for more standards than any other public cloud provider out there.
That's right.
So number one, so we trust the platform. When we look at the most ethical company award last year, Microsoft. And those are just a couple. And we build software at my company, and everything we build is a cloud resident solution that runs 100% in Azure. So it's not just something I say; it's definitely something I'm very well invested in. And we went that direction a few years ago when it was not necessarily obvious it was the right thing to do. We felt that the Microsoft vision would prove itself out, and I think it's fair to say it did.
So where do you start? Where do you start as a professional? You want to get immersed in the security elements because your company or you've decided, hey, I'm going to make the Azure commitment. I'm going to jump in to understand all this. And yeah, let's not talk about right now about training per se, but let's talk about where do you start as far as the path? What is the learning path that gets you from, I don't really know about security, to being credible, number one, and then let's say being certified, number two, that you are credible?
Right. So credibility in the world of security is a matter of context. So my credibility tends to come in the area of strategy and implementation in the Microsoft stack, in that I can work with an organization, understand their security needs, and outline a strategy that adequately implements defense in depth, a layered approach for that organization. Have I reverse engineered a virus? I have, with somebody else's course, long enough to know that reverse engineering malware is not going to be my thing. And so I say that to say that choosing your place in any realm, and cybersecurity being one of those, is you have to pick your scope, know your role, jabroni, to quote Dwayne Johnson. And so if you're new to the world of cybersecurity, Azure and the cloud is a good place to start. You have to start with the fundamentals.
Okay. And what are those?
And so that might be learning one of the simpler areas of cybersecurity and going and taking that entry-level certification. So AZ-500, for example, that we came here to talk about today, is not the entry level you start with.
Okay.
You're going to be a while getting to that. But if we go back to something like AZ-900, the Microsoft Azure Fundamentals Exam, that's a great way to understand their all-up stack at a very high level and put yourself into that bucket. Am I an IT pro? Am I a developer? Am I a DevOps engineer? Do I want to be a cloud architect that's really designing solutions? Am I going to be that administrator that's just administering Office 365 or Azure VMs day to day? It's all about that scope. We all want to learn. We all want to be that expert in the all-up, stack, be it Microsoft or be it Azure or anybody else's stack. You don't start there. So
AZ-900 now is under my belt. I understand the broad, how does Azure function? What are the major components? Where do I need to look, and where do I need to go to get features and functions? I'm not going to be an expert, but then I move to the next step and I say, okay, I've had some experience. I've had 6 months, a year in the business. Now I want to get to the next level, because security is kind of vital and the lifeblood of any credible organization. Pays well, pays extremely well, pays sometimes ridiculously well. And I say, well, I want to do this. This is a great field, and it's never going to go away. I mean, we don't need to talk about global politics to realize global security is going to be the topic for our lifetimes. So what do I do next? What's my next step?
Well, so you could look at a security-focused exam, and there are a couple of different ones that you might poke your head into before you get to AZ-500. So if I was going to a next step, I might start with something a little more general, like Microsoft Azure Administrator, which isn't strictly security-focused, or I might look at the MS-500, which is the Microsoft 365 Security Administration. So that's a more focused, hands-on exam. And in fact, when folks come to me and say, I'm just getting started, I've taken AZ-900, and what do I do next? I'll typically advise them that MS-500 is a better starting place for a lot of folks, because it's dealing with more fundamental concepts of security. It's focused on securing identities and authentication and implementing role-based access control. That's a great and privileged identity. It's a foundation that will serve you well in AZ-500.
Okay.
And in fact, I would say that if you take AZ-900, which you can knock out from start to finish in the same week, no matter who you are, MS-500, if you're a hands-on person, is a great next step, I think.
Okay.
That's going to then make AZ-500 an easier road for you.
So that's kind of a message to me, because I'm listening to you in terms of not being an expert, is to bring one of our experts on. Maybe Pete does it, maybe someone else does it in that next layer. So now I finished that. I've got another. Now I'm 9 months into my career at this, let's say, and now I'm saying, okay, Pete, I've heard that. Now where am I going next? Because I'm both skill driven. I want to demonstrate to my team and to myself that I'm capable of this. But yeah, I want to sort of get a bump up in salary. I want to start talking about more skills that are going to push me to the next level. Am I going to move right into the AZ-500 level?
So certainly you could. When I look at AZ-500, it touches on a broad array of services. So when I look at AZ-500, I see an exam that encompasses more than any one job role. So when what I think is a differentiator about AZ-500 is if you really go in and crush this exam, you have touched a number of technologies at a level of depth that prepare you for a number of roles. You could pivot toward security analyst and maybe take a role in that team and try to grow your skills into some really deep specialization there. Mm-hmm. Or you could move into the world of DevOps and maybe you start as that entry level ops engineer on the ops side of DevOps and grow your capabilities there. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you pivot back to identities and you go work with Microsoft 365 in the world of what we think of as Office 365 and maybe into Intune, managing devices, more of a modern desktop support type role.
Mm-hmm. And are those kind of, what's the word, are they equivalently in demand in your experience across enterprises, or we start getting to there's only company that has 5,000 people and more, that's going to be required, or companies from 1 to 500 won't need these? Is this pretty much a universal requirement, obviously based on the company's business, or is it's catch as catch can? You really have to decide based on the niche you're in.
So there are two immediate aspects of that question, if I'm just going to unpack that. So once I'm inside a company, do all companies need those skills? Companies of any size, yeah, most of them do. They need folks that are managing their user-facing services, helping manage those devices. Mm-hmm. They need a security team that's looking at our security posture and our defense in-depth strategy. They need folks working with their developers to develop that DevOps strategy so we can release code frequently and securely. Mm-hmm. Now, are they all in equal demand? No, that's a mixed bag, right? We do know that in the world of cybersecurity that there's a big skills gap there. And there's a skills gap from a Microsoft perspective as well as everywhere else. But, if I'm going to pick my road, I'm going to look, my scope really needs to be where am I today and what is my next step. So I might know that 5 years from now I'd like to be a senior security analyst, but I'm not going to go get that job tomorrow. I need to look at what that next step is that's going to get me on that road. And on that road might mean into a company doing that Intune Office 365 type work, or maybe working on the ops side with a development team, so I can work my way into the security department once I've put a little more experience on my CV. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little about DevOps and security. Can you, because it's obviously a buzzword that people don't necessarily understand. The Azure DevOps is a specific flavor, I guess.
Well, so DevOps is a strategy. DevOps is a religion at this point. Much like agile development, it's a way of doing things, and your tool set is going to vary by platform. So if we look at Azure, there's Azure DevOps, which includes Azure pipelines to create our continuous integration and deployment pipeline. They have Azure boards to create our Kanban board so we can manage our backlog. They have Azure repos, which are your Git repositories. Mm-hmm. But every public cloud provider has their preferred tool set. Microsoft has a very strong native tool set that integrates with all of their service offerings. So you get with Microsoft, you get kind of a rare intersection here that you get best in platform in terms of the services that are available to you and their integration, but you also, in many respects, get best of breed in terms of the security. Mm-hmm. Because when I think about DevOps, I need to, and in modern DevOps, we're typically releasing multiple times a week. We're releasing microservices applications, so they're containerized on Docker or Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. I need to scan my code for vulnerabilities. I need to watch my Kubernetes cluster for security vulnerabilities. I need to watch my container images that sit in my container repository to make sure those are secure. So all of these aspects need to be managed and actively monitored, scanned, so to speak. So if we think about that scope discussion that I mentioned a bit ago, the scope of AZ-500 is very broad and very deep at the same time. You're going to be tested on a very wide range of technologies, but down into some details. So if I were looking at a job, DevOps is an area that's very much in demand, and I could pick my security battle right there. I could go in and be that security expert in a DevOps context, which then gives me that next step toward maybe moving into a higher role in the security world. I mean, but who knows? You might wind up, finding that you love DevOps, and that's just your step into the security world, and maybe that remains your context in the long term. I think you have to sort of be open to just doing what you enjoy.
Right. Yeah, but it sounds like, given the integration and the ownership now of Git by Microsoft, that's going to be a good way to go. So we actually have courses on GitHub and whatnot. But in terms of, let's say, my own parallel track, not a bad idea to get into DevOps in parallel to going through the security world, right? Because presumably any security environment is going to have to be agile. Right, it's going to be probably of all the environments. We all talk about software and machine learning and all that being agile, but oh my gosh, if you're not agile in security, yesterday's news is old news, right? And you have to move really quickly and be able to communicate that across teams and across projects and across, I guess, evolving security holes. So it's probably a good idea to go down a parallel track on some level. So now I've got a little bit of DevOps under my belt. I've got some of those fundamentals under my belt. Now I'm learning the first, as you described, the MS programs in some fundamentals of security. Now I'm a year into my career. Now I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to take the next step. I like what Pete's talking about. What do I need to do to prepare myself for the AZ-500? What's the next things that I'm going to say? I'm jumping into this. I can learn this.
So I'm going to talk through 5 tips with you right now.
Okay.
For doing this right. So, and I want to start by just framing that DevOps example that you brought up for one word there that's really important. What we did was scoped. We established a scope of how we were going to step into the world of security. We said, DevOps is an area that's in demand. I can learn Microsoft's DevOps tooling, and at the same time, there's a security context there that's very relevant, very important, very integrated into that DevOps learning. So I more or less learn a couple of important facets of cybersecurity as I am onboarding that DevOps skill set. Now I'm sitting inside a large organization. I have a high degree of competence in the world of DevOps, even if I'm just the ops engineer. Developers always need a good ops person that can help them, secure, release, etc. And so now I can look around my organization and say, what's that next area, that next step that's interesting to me? If I look at my security team, what sort of needs do they have there? There's, there might be an analyst role there that's very Microsoft 365 focused. I might say, I want to branch out and, maybe I want to step into the world of offensive security. I want to be a blue team member. I want to get into those red team, blue team exercises. That's a more technical is not a fully descriptive word, but it's a very specific security focus. But I could also look around my org and say, as the DevOps / DevOps DevSecOps security expert, I can take some of my learnings here and I can apply those to other areas of the Microsoft stack. So maybe I look at the cloud architecture team. Say I'd like to step up, and I would like to be that person that's designing solutions for my organization and making sure those solutions clear the security bar.
Right.
At which point now, maybe I'm on the architecture team, but I'm interfacing with the security team. So I'm security team adjacent in a cybersecurity related role, but I'm also growing my skills on the Microsoft stack, which makes me broadly marketable. If you're an offensive security person, if you're that red team, blue team security analyst sort of role, that puts you into a very specific job role. But if I'm growing my security skills in the context of the Microsoft platform, I started on the DevOps team, maybe I hop over to the cloud architecture team, or maybe I hop over to operations and I work more with user-facing device and identity, that modern desktop support type role. I can move in that Microsoft orbit, gaining security skills in the context of the Microsoft stack, and now I'm making myself very broadly employable. And I go get that Microsoft security certification. I go get that Microsoft security engineer cert, and now I'm doing something very specific that it feels very specific, but it's making me very broadly employable.
Right. So you're taking the security kernel, for lack of a better word, and you're Johnny Appleseed. You're throwing the seeds out into other areas so that you can become critical to that core of what the product, the platform, the program management is all about.
Right.
And then apply and layer on additional skills on top of that.
Right. That Azure Security Engineer Associate certification that you get with AZ-500 is a very credible and sought after, title nowadays. But I'm also demonstrating there that I have security knowledge in the Microsoft context. So there's a fair bit of Microsoft cloud security knowledge there. Microsoft cloud knowledge in general that comes with that. I have a lot of deep Azure expertise at that point that I've acquired either through my progressing through various job roles or through preparing for this exam in a very hands-on way.
So you have, we have for everyone who's interested, of course, come on our platform and you'll see one of Pete's courses and programs is literally the test questions and the prep. And there's a lot of opportunity also to get on the system to chat and get on a Slack channel discussion with Pete and others about security. What do I, besides preparing for the material, is there a course that I can take? Is there an AZ-500 course that will prepare me for this exam besides the test questions?
So there are a few things you can do. So on the Starweaver platform, I have some AZ-500 test questions over there. So let's talk about that in context, and we'll talk about your hands-on training options. So when I think about the five keys to really preparing for this exam in a way that's as efficient as you can be, because we can prepare in a couple of different ways. So, for example, I know an engineer who studied for 1.5 years to take his CISSP exam, 18 months. I studied for 12 hours. Now, granted, I have a lot of experience behind me, but my 12 hours could have been 4 weeks had I gone about it a different way. So what I did were exactly these 5 things, and they're broadly applicable to any exam you're going to take. But with something like AZ-500, it's going to pay dividends to pay attention to this. So number 1, I want to get a current, accurate, and focused exam study guide. So I want something that tells me what are the skills that are tested on this exam. So Microsoft publishes that. If I just Google search for AZ-500, skills measured, I'll find that. But it's more than that. I want to find an exam study guide that gives me some relevant reading or viewing or study related to those line items. Okay? I actually published something myself that I call the Ultimate AZ-500 Exam Study Guide, because I lay out reading for every point tested on that exam, with some videos, with some reading on the Microsoft website, but also some training content. So number 2, and this is really important. I mentioned that AZ-500 is broad and it's deep. So number 2, I recommend everybody do a thorough self-assessment to find your weak areas. What you want to find is the 20%, hopefully 20% of the AZ-500 content where you need to spend 80% of your time. So figure out what you know and what you don't know. And the way I like to see people do that self-assessment are through some exam questions.
Mm-hmm.
Take some practice questions, and your weak spots will typically present themselves. And if you're attacking AZ-500 and you have no experience in Azure, I promise you every area is going to be your weak area. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and start with more fundamental content.
And they can do that on our platform through the quizzes the quiz questions.
Right. So you've got AZ-500 there. You have some Azure architecture content over there, which speaks more to AZ-300. But if you learn architecture, you're going to pick up some security context there as well. And there are a fair number of online learning avenues. So Starweaver's got good content, and then other platforms out there. A lot of folks know me from LinkedIn, and you can go grab courses anywhere. So one thing I do recommend is also look right there on Microsoft's platform, and I'll tell you why. And this is a bit of a secret I'm discovering, and I didn't realize this. I made a video about this one thing last week. So when you go to the AZ-500 skills measured page, you go to the homepage for that exam, you scroll down, and you'll see where you can schedule your exam. You scroll a bit further, and you will see a PDF you can download, which is their skills measured. And if you scroll a bit further yet on that same page, you will find some Microsoft online learning. So one of the top, depends on the week, one of the top 1 to 3 complaints or questions I hear is, how do I get hands-on learning if I don't have access to Azure? Well, you do have access to Azure in context. So the Microsoft Online Training offers access to what they call an Azure sandbox. So in the context of preparing for an exam, if you're doing a lab exercise, they will show you, a hands-on Azure environment through a cloud shell, so you can do, whatever, you can complete whatever that exercise is. So if I go take a self-assessment on a site like Starweaver, I identify my weak areas, then I can go back to, that free online training. I can go take some AZ-300 architecture content on Starweaver. I can go back to Microsoft's free training and take some of that more AZ-500 focused content. But number 3 is get some good and hopefully inexpensive online training, and know that in the right context you have access to that Azure sandbox. So saying I don't have any access to Azure is actually not a thing. You can find access.
Is that limited? Is that 30-day? I know they have for the business enterprise, you get a 30-day trial for free, but do you know if the sandbox is unlimited access to play?
Here's the scoop on that. So with the sandbox, I get access in the context of my Microsoft training. I get access to up to 10 sandboxes per day. So that sandbox is an environment carved out just for me in the context of this lab exercise. Okay, so I'm not provisioning services or anything. Whatever I need to work in, if I need to provision a key vault, I can do it in the context of this sandbox, and I can have up to 10 sandboxes a day, and each of those lasts 4 hours. So I can get more sandboxes in a day than I can use, but I have to use them in that Microsoft context. There's actually an Azure Sandbox FAQ, and you want to pay attention to that, because if you abuse it, you will lose it. They can take it away from you. But you get up to 10 sandboxes every single day. It's just in the context of your Microsoft learning. So you want to read the fine print there, because you can't just go spin up a sandbox and go crazy.
For all of you who are watching, Pete knows Scott Duffy well, and Scott's one of our Azure instructors as well, and you can go on our platform and get the Azure Immersion. It's a very deep course as well. Again, it doesn't cover all the things that Pete's talking about in much more focused and laser-like format, but there's a lot of content there. So there's a lot to learn. I mean, this is kind of an endless journey, and obviously as the journey continues from a business point of view, Microsoft will be extending and enhancing services, whether they're IoT and machine learning and all the whole litany of things. So what do you think in terms of career dollars? Let's talk about dollars and cents, because that's always helpful to understand. What kind of career path can I expect in terms of U.S. dollar earnings? I mean, you don't have to give us the exact numbers right now, but where am I going to sit if I'm AZ-500 certified?
So there are people out there who are AZ-500 certified, and when I look at their CV, I see they don't have a lot of experience, but they have many, many certifications. I would rather see someone with some relevant job experience and targeted certification learning, as opposed to somebody with 50 certifications they've knocked out in the last year and no learning, because I know at that point they're a mile wide and an inch deep. So I think you want to be careful about perceptions. And I'm not saying if you have 50 certifications, that's bad. You want to manage the perception that you have more certification than actual knowledge, right? There's context to that knowledge. And any of these areas, DevOps, architecture, identity focus, all of those can get into the above the six-figure mark USD. So if you want to get to 100,000 plus, get into a senior role in any of those areas, and that is absolutely possible. But you've brought up this important thing that I mentioned here, which is focus. So my first 3 tips here were: get yourself an exam study guide. Number 2, do a self-assessment to figure out where your weak spots are. Number 3, get some good online training and inexpensive online training. And just to finish off that online training note, I like online training over in-person training because it's inexpensive. And even with online training, I can find a way to get access to those experts through a Slack channel or a Q&A area or focused, Q&A sessions. I can find that access. I don't need to spend, $4 or $5 grand and a week in a classroom to do that. But it brings me to number 4, which is focus for AZ-500, focus on Azure services in the security context to avoid information overload. So we all want to be the expert, and I could know all of the fine points of high availability and how I can deploy Azure Key Vault from the command line, and I can remember all of these very intricate details and syntaxes. But at the end of the day, Microsoft is going to focus their questions to me in the security context. So I want to make sure that I maintain that orbit with my study, just to avoid information overload. Because my recall at exam time is going to be very important. And if I have learned everything there is to know, or I've touched everything there is to know, my ability to retain all of that for very long is going to be fairly limited. And number 5, so in that vein of recall at exam time, which is all important. So number 4, we focus on our security context. Number 5 is, if you're unfamiliar with the technology, hands-on experience is absolutely key for exam recall. So you need to hear about it from an expert. You need to go put your hands on it so you have that context. There was a study, I think it came out of the University of Chicago. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the source because I'm on the spot here. I think it was the University of Chicago, where they actually measured this, and they discovered that, in fact, exam time recall was much better when the examinee had performed a physical task. So in a virtual environment like the cloud, a physical task means I put my hands on a keyboard and mouse and I completed that task, right?
Absolutely.
That context is super important. Which is why access to an Azure environment is also so important.
Yeah, one of the things that all of our courses involve is the hands-on labs, the hands-on cases, and then the collaborative labs. So it's one thing for me to do a lab in an environment, submit the answer, and go, presto, I've got the answer, and that's really testing my knowledge. So what I like to do, and what we've done many times in our live classes, and we do this, we're actually engineering this into our platform. So we do these things called comprehensive cases, where we start with a case and a problem, and we're moving from, in the case, the last one we did was we're moving from on-prem to the cloud. The Azure cloud, in this case, was working on this program. And then each week we give you and your team, so it's team-based, social-based learning, a problem set. You solve the problem in your way, you submit it, other teams grade you, and then you come back the next week and you do it again. And you keep iterating this. And so in the environment that we're building out on our platform, the goal that we have is to have Pete and other people who have the kind of depth of knowledge doing live demonstrations that are not one-way demonstrations like we're doing now, but really demonstrations where you can see a screen. He can take you into questions. You can ask him about this. You can do that. Maybe he can actually have you do it while the demonstration is going on, so you can actually see. And there's this last point that Pete raised, which I cannot emphasize enough. It's like no one tells you how to ride a bicycle. You ride a bicycle, and then you fall, and then someone shows you how. This is now. When do you get up on your pedals when you're racing? Where do you position yourself in the race? I just use the bicycle example because I ride a lot, and I also have the experience of years ago thinking, I'm ahead of the pack, I'm number one, I'm coming down the finish line, and 100 yards before the finish line, I was literally last in New York City because everyone was waiting to blast by me. So these are the kind of things that Pete's talking about, the hands-on, real-world, and instructor-led, because you get the expertise of, hey, don't be that first rider. Watch the first rider. So I think that apropos of that is really about, how do you learn from others? This whole thing about, instructor-led training, I'm listening there, I'm sitting in a room, I'm passively observing. First of all, it doesn't work in general, and it certainly doesn't work for adults. It doesn't work for people who are, over the age of 25 or 22, and says, this is just, I need to do it. I need to make a mistake. I realize, and then I need to have someone sitting on my shoulder going, Pete saying, no, that's not the way to do it. Just focus it this way, you'll get to the right answer. So
I'm glad you brought up collaborative learning. So that adds some context. It gives you some additional anchors to help lock in that knowledge and improve your exam time recall for sure. But it brings to light something I see all too commonly now. So we're in a world where social media rules and everybody is advised to build their brand. So the ability to collaborate with others and to be that person in the room that can say, I don't know the answer, but I'm always learning so I can go get that answer. I think the right hashtag is always be learning.
Yep.
My Twitter profile, where I have 10,000 followers, and I couldn't tell you how they got there. I didn't, go out trying to build a Twitter following. My Twitter background has my daily reminder: wake up, kick ass, be kind, repeat. And if we can all, go whether we're focusing in a collaborative learning environment or we're focusing on a collaborative endeavor like DevOps, your ability to onboard these skills and then go in and be part of a team where you're seen as that person that's lifting up your team and helping fill those gaps and raising others up.
Yep.
That's how you're going to progress in your career.
Yep.
I can remember getting a promotion in my past life here professionally once, where I was similarly qualified from a technical perspective to two other candidates that were in the finals, and I got the job because I was the one who could work with these other teams. They said, when there's a problem, he doesn't blame us, he just comes and we solve it. And that was my only qualification beyond anybody else, was I wasn't the finger pointer.
Yeah, you're making the critical point that is, like you made the point before about the certifications. I don't know any company that I've ever worked with, and we've worked with many hundreds of global companies. I never said to them, well, I need my people to get the certification because they need to have the knowledge, because they don't need the letters behind their name, they need the knowledge. And then secondly, they need the ability to collaborate with others, because regardless of who, let's assume you're the straight A student, if you will. You get the 100% on the AZ-500 exam. You just nail it. But you can't communicate that. You can't work with the person who doesn't know it, but is going to have their fingers on the keyboard. You can't say to Pete, who's across the country, for me, hey, this is what I need to know. And he goes, oh, you're just such a waste of time. Now, that's going to be the end of a lot of relationships. So the point is, I want to emphasize as well, it's very much relationship driven. In your world, whether you know nothing or you know everything, and this is, by the way, one of our criteria for understanding why we work with people like Pete, because not only you're a guru and not only you're an expert in the field, but you're easy to work with. You're what I call a sweetheart. So, and people laugh, and there's always people smile on their face. But let me tell you, and I shouldn't say this, but there's a very well-known video. You should Google it. It's called the No Assholes Rule. It's written by an MIT professor. You should watch the video. It's funny and it's true. The last thing a company wants is someone who's going to unsettle the chemistry of an organization. collaboration. So the most important thing you can do is be, team player sounds like it's some soft book, self-help book. No, it's about collaboration, communication, and learning. And then saying, I don't know this, but I'm going to learn it. I don't know it right now. Please help me. And that's always good. So, and it's unfortunate sometimes in the learning environment, every instructor knows this, and that, there's always one person who's asking 20 questions. It would be great if everyone were asking 5, because, or everyone or 20 people asking 1 question, because the engagement, the doing, and the immersion in the experience is vital. And I think that what Pete's talking about is you have to be a team player, let's use that word, those words, but you have to be able to work with others and share your knowledge, and then be willing to take other people's advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important, and it comes back to you down the road. I was actually on the phone with somebody who works at Microsoft the other day, and congratulating them on some promotion or something, and they said, I actually owe a good chunk of my IT career to you, because we worked together on this project, and they quoted a project that was 8 or 9 years old. I'd forgotten about this project, but we had worked together, and they were a beginner. They were new to the Microsoft stack at that time, and we worked on a project in a politically challenging environment, and they at that time didn't have a lot of knowledge, but they had a great attitude. Said, you know what, you can help me. We'll you'll gain some knowledge in this project. We'll work together. It'll be a great result. And she worked hand in hand with me from beginning until we got to demo day at the end of the project. And now she's got a great deal of expertise on the Microsoft stack. She's gone a different direction, on the Microsoft stack than I did, but she got to that pivot point we talked about, where she had gotten some of that fundamental learning. She picked an aspect of the Microsoft stack where she wanted to focus. So she went the route of really working with identities and endpoints. So she's more what we'd call modern workplace focused. So she's focusing a lot on work from home these days. Super valuable skill set. But yeah, that's what it comes down to. But I like the idea of focusing on cybersecurity in the Microsoft context, because it opens the door to you for varying levels of security focus. Cybersecurity is going to be an undercurrent in everything we do, right?
Yep.
But it's going to open a lot of doors in terms of career options. When you look at the job listings to see what's out there, you might be able to pivot from to architect or DevOps or identity or something else based on what's available right now, and certainly something that's very relevant today.
Yep. As we're wrapping up, I am reminded about just talked about you're describing someone that you met and networked with previously. I think that you could have the AZ-500 credential. Okay, you secured that now. How are you going to get to the next role? And most of it's going to be social. It's going to be networking. Yeah, you might submit a resume on LinkedIn or somewhere. I will tell you that most people don't get jobs. Most sales don't come from an over the transom sale. It comes from a relationship. And so networking, reach out to Pete on LinkedIn, absolutely. Reach out to me. Get on a course, social network on the course. Just ask people questions. How do you form a relationship when you find someone asking an interesting question? The person who knows nothing but asks an interesting question, to me, demonstrates they're on the right trajectory than a person who knows everything but doesn't ask any questions. So from my point of view, and Pete can wrap up with this, is that, how do you build your career? Well, my answer is number one, certainly developing skills and knowledge and having a good attitude and all the things Pete talked about in terms of habit forming, creating habits that are good habits that build your career. But it's also about socializing. That is to say, reaching out, connecting with people who are in your field. Obviously, if Pete, if you were going to be in basket weaving, don't contact me. I can't help you. But I might know someone who does basket weaving. Seriously, if you say, look, I think this security thing is really good. I've learned a whole bunch, Pete, but you know what? Could you help me think about DevOps? Pete's probably going to say, well, okay, but you need to go talk to Joe. So this is a way in which you build your network, and this is obviously, so Pete, why don't you just take us home and tell us a little about that part of the career journey?
Yeah, so I have a lot of DevOps experience, but that's another story. But
Yeah.
but you raised something important here. So finding a job is a lot about your ability to socialize, right? And I think it's being appropriately engaging with folks socially, but it's also about being humble. So like I look at the word guru there. I will never call myself a guru or a rock star or any of those other things. Those make me cringe, at least if I were to say them about myself, because that's the whatever the opposite of humble is. That's those are words for other people to use about you, not for you to use about yourself. You want to be an expert in something, and you can go out and prove that expertise through your job experience, through certification. And I think it's just about being social and friendly and humble and positive. Mm-hmm. And the rest is easy from there. And to your point, I do get quite a few connections on LinkedIn who reach out to say, hey, is AZ-500 what I should take next? And I always ask a couple of questions there, and then I can give them a yes or a no and tell them where I would start if I were them. Yep. And I have opinions, and just like everybody else, and you know what they say about opinions. But if you're somebody out there who's wondering that, you can come ask me, and I'll give you an answer based on the context you give me about your current experience and where you want to head. And then you can take that or leave it. But I'm happy to offer the input. We all have lots of choices in life. I can help make them better choices, maybe.
Yeah, and if you go on our platform next month, you will see a tool to allow you to specify where you are, how much time you want to dedicate to your career development. You'll be able to pick and see what competencies and skills, they call competencies or skills, are related to that role, and what kind of learning. So a very customized, personalized career path. Pete's helping us build out that tool, and I think that the more you can provide feedback, so go on get access to our platform, get access to the customer support. Tell them you've been on this webinar. They'll cut you a great deal, like almost nothing. Certainly there's a free part of it, but even if you want, we're building a community. We want you to be part of the community. That is, we want people who are interested, who are engaged, and if we can help you, you can help us. It's all the better. So with that, I want to thank Pete for the time. Again, we used the Meet the Gurus title just to catch your attention. I don't my first words were, I'm not the guru, Pete is, and I did say that about him because he is. Maybe he says I'm a guru about setting up this OBS, but I'm not. That was proven early on, and of course my power on my computer was running low, so I had to duck out for a second. But with that, everyone, Pete, we appreciate your time, your insights, and everyone will put this out on our platform as well. It'll be on YouTube, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks again. My pleasure, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Yep.